Imagine a war designed to create absolute security. Instead, Iran survives, Israel remains threatened, America spends heavily, and regional alliances begin shifting suddenly. The strategy looks very different and nobody knows what happens next. The battlefield tells one story while politicians tell another. Behind closed doors, commanders and intelligence officials are asking what if overwhelming force failed before anyone admitted it. That question changes everything. According to Trita Parsi, Israel wanted more than damage. The objective was stripping Iran's ability to defend itself. That would leave Israel militarily dominant across the region, but Iran resisted that outcome. Think of the strategy as one brutal equation: maximum security for Israel, minimum security for everyone else. Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine illustrate this imbalance. Iran was supposed to join them. The first campaign exposed that uncomfortable reality very quickly. Iranian defenses absorbed punishment while missiles kept arriving. The political system remained standing despite devastating pressure. Surrender never became the expected outcome. Then came a second war with direct American participation. Washington hoped overwhelming force could finally deliver capitulation. Instead, the conflict became endurance, logistics, production, and political. Well, those are harder battles. Now the mathematics become frightening. For every military planner, missiles can be comparatively simple and inexpensive to manufacture. Interceptors require extraordinary precision, speed, technology, and cost. Defending can become economically unsustainable. Iran therefore possessed an uncomfortable production advantage from beginning. If missiles arrive faster than interceptors, inventories steadily shrink. Every additional day increases pressure on defenders. Eventually, mathematics becomes strategy and the stakes are rising rapidly. Parsi argues the surprise was not the arithmetic itself. The surprise was how quickly American stocks appeared. Strained interceptors, ammunition, and long-range weapons became strategic resources. They were never infinite. Every missile launch therefore means something beyond battlefield damage. Commanders see targets, strategists see inventories, factories see production schedules, presidents see political consequences. Suddenly, one projectile can influence decisions thousands miles away. Then comes the Strait of Hormuz, a global choke point threatens shipping there, and energy markets immediately feel pressure, fail to guarantee passage, and allies question American protection. Geography becomes strategic leverage. That makes the strait more than a waterway, it becomes a credibility test for Washington itself. Can America guarantee passage under sustained attack? Can it protect commerce without escalating endlessly? Nobody knows. American forces operate from numerous regional positions nearby today, yet the war raises one uncomfortable question: do bases actually guarantee security? If installations become vulnerable, their strategic value changes dramatically. Allies notice. For Gulf governments, the calculation is changing too. Buying American weapons may still make sense strategically, hosting American forces may still matter, but trusting those bases completely is another question. Confidence is fragile. The consequences extend far beyond the Middle East. Asian governments are watching American performance closely. If Washington struggles sustaining Iran's conflict, planners may question prolonged confrontation with China. That comparison matters enormously. Military power is not simply possessing advanced weapons systems, it means replacing weapons, protecting supply lines, sustaining alliances, and maintaining political support. A spectacular opening strike proves very little. Endurance decides wars. Meanwhile, the conflict is reshaping America's debate about Israel-Gaza, transformed foreign policy into arguments about morality, elections, civil liberties, and American responsibility. The issue now crosses traditional political boundaries. That matters. Parsi argues the Iran conflict made Israeli influence more visible. Connections between Israeli priorities and American decisions became harder. Separating whether every interpretation is correct or not, perceptions can permanently reshape politics. On America's right, younger voters increasingly question traditional foreign policy assumptions. On the left, opposition is already intense. Criticism of Israel now crosses ideological boundaries. Politicians can no longer dismiss that pressure easily. Inside military and intelligence communities, changes may be quieter. People who privately question strategy may speak more openly now. Parsi says deployed soldiers described perceptions that this war primarily served Israel. That matters. Whether every soldier shares that perception remains impossible to know, but perceptions inside armed forces matter greatly. Morale, trust, strategic confidence, and belief in missions influence interpretation of sacrifice and risk. That can matter. Iran's leadership survived the killing of senior officials, according to the supplied interview. That resilience challenged assumptions about decapitation strategies. Iran contains multiple institutions and power centers. Removing individuals cannot guarantee collapse. That structure makes leadership targeting unpredictable and potentially counterproductive. Removing leaders can create chaos, succession, retaliation, or greater determination. A government under attack may become less willing to compromise. That is dangerous. Here is the paradox facing regime change strategists: the harder outsiders push, the stronger resistance. Factions can become ordinary. Iranians may oppose their government while simultaneously rejecting foreign military intervention. Both positions can coexist. That distinction is crucial when analyzing public opinion. Disliking a government does not mean welcoming bombs. Wanting reform does not mean accepting occupation. Societies can resent rulers while resisting outside attacks fiercely. According to the supplied interview, ceasefire language remained dangerously ambiguous. Different sides interpreted commitments differently. One believed restrictions were accepted, another believed strategic preparations remained possible. Ambiguity can restart wars without declarations. The strait became one major flashpoint, Lebanon another. If withdrawal commitments conflict with later arrangements, every unresolved clause creates another collision point. A ceasefire can therefore fail without anyone officially restarting war. Lebanon reveals an even larger question about deterrence. Can Iran rebuild an umbrella protecting regional partners if attacks trigger consequences? Unilateral freedom becomes harder. The entire regional balance could shift again. That possibility alarms Israel because deterrence changes behavior before missiles fly. Every strike could risk a larger response. Military freedom becomes more expensive. The region could become more dangerous, yet more balanced. Palestine sits directly inside this transformation now. Stronger regional leverage could increase pressure for ceasefires and negotiations, but leverage cannot automatically create Palestinian statehood. Justice, or lasting security outcomes remain uncertain. The Gulf states face their own strategic dilemma today. Several moved closer to Israel while viewing Iran as the larger threat. A major regional war can reverse calculations, yet old relationships rarely disappear overnight. The deepest question may therefore belong to Washington itself. If America wants influence without endless wars, commitments must become sustainable. Bases, weapons, alliances, and sanctions carry enormous costs. Eventually taxpayers and voters notice. And this is where the story becomes bigger than Iran. Failed strategies can survive politically for years before consequences become obvious. Stockpiles recover, bases rebuild, alliances adjust, but credibility is much harder rebuilding. If this war failed to create promised deterrence, nothing returns unchanged. Iran may remain wounded, Israel remains powerful, and America remains influential, yet assumptions connecting those realities have been shaken. The next move matters. But the most dangerous consequence may be psychological. If regional governments conclude that American power has limits, they may diversify alliances, build independent defenses, and negotiate directly with rivals. That does not automatically create peace. It can create a multipolar Middle East where miscalculation becomes harder to predict. The old assumptions may never return to normal for governments across the entire region. For Israel, that would represent a profound strategic change. Military superiority could remain intact, yet freedom of action could shrink. Every operation would require considering Iranian missiles, regional partners, international pressure, and American willingness to intervene. Power would still exist, but using it could become far more complicated. That could transform calculations across the entire region for leaders reconsidering security strategies today. For Iran, survival would also come with a price. Infrastructure can be rebuilt, weapons can be replaced, and commanders can be promoted, but economic pressure, civilian suffering, damaged industry, and prolonged isolation can accumulate. Tehran may claim strategic resilience while facing a difficult question: how long can that resilience last? Those costs could reshape the future if conflict remains unresolved for years. For Washington, the lesson is even broader. Wars are not won by spectacular opening strikes alone. They are won through logistics, production, alliances, diplomacy, intelligence, and sustainable political objectives. If the United States enters another major conflict without answering those questions, the first battlefield victory could become the beginning of a much larger strategic defeat. That is the real strategic test now. And for Palestine, the outcome remains painfully uncertain. A changing balance of power could increase pressure for ceasefires and negotiations, but it cannot guarantee freedom, sovereignty, or security. What it can change is the cost of continued violence. If the old system made escalation cheap, a new system could make every escalation politically and militarily expensive, and that changes every future negotiation. That leaves the world watching the next move. Will Washington rebuild the old regional posture, or accept that the Middle East is becoming more independent and unpredictable? Will Israel rely on overwhelming force, or adapt to stronger deterrence? And will Iran turn battlefield survival into diplomacy? The answers may define the next decade. The next chapter could be more dangerous than expected. The war may be over, but the consequences are only beginning. Iran survived, Israel faces a new strategic reality, and America is confronting questions it can no longer ignore. Across the Middle East, alliances are shifting, deterrence is being tested, and trust is disappearing. The biggest question is no longer who won the war. It is whether the next conflict can be prevented or whether today's unresolved tensions are already creating tomorrow's battlefield.